So this is the absolute shortest one of these. So this is the last one. Congrats. It won't be very long. Where we're going to look at the Holy Roman Empire, Austria, Prussia, and I think that's it off the top of my head. I'm getting confused a little bit. So Holy Roman Empire. All right. So it's not really a country review, but you get it. So it's not holy. It's really not Roman. And it's not even really an empire because it's decentralized. They do have it's made up of 300 plus different states, localities, provinces, states, whatever, which each have their own ruler. However, some of these larger states were electors that elected a Holy Roman Emperor. This is the leader of the empire, but has little power of enforcing things without agreement from local rulers. So it's very decentralized. So this is why if you wrote about an effective centralization, you couldn't have wrote about Charles V or Ferdinand II of the Holy Roman Empire because it never centralized. So some of the major events: the Protestant Reformation, started by Martin Luther; the Diet of Worms, where he was called a heretic; the Peasant Revolts he inspired, a lot of Martin Luther; the religious wars, where the Schismatic League versus Charles V resulted in the Peace of Augsburg; the 30 Years' War, where Ferdinand II revokes religious freedom, that has the 4 different phases that end with the Peace of Westphalia. Remember, the Peace of Augsburg and Peace of Westphalia are very, very similar. However, the Peace of Augsburg in 1555 only granted rulers the ability to pick between Catholicism or Lutheran, and the Peace of Westphalia adds Calvinist onto that as well. These wars are going to be fought here, very destructive. Just as many people are going to die from famine, disease, and everything else as warfare, especially the 30 Years' War, where maybe like a third of certain areas in Germany or German areas are going to die, which is a lot of people. Again, famine, war, all of that stuff kind of combined. So when you think about the Holy Roman Empire, I don't want you to think of it as a country, but like I said, a bunch of smaller things that basically, as one blanket ruler, overthrown the top of it. Because remember, when Charles V was fighting his war, when Ferdinand II is fighting his war, he's technically fighting his own people because the war within itself is within the Holy Roman Empire, at least to start, of the 30 Years' War, too. So the major rulers you need to know are Charles V and Ferdinand II and what they did. So Eastern and Central Europe, the Holy Roman Empire included, are going to remain agriculturally and feudalism based for much longer and were decentralized for a lot longer. They didn't have access to the Atlantic Ocean to participate in the age of exploration. So the reason we haven't talked about these places a ton yet, it would be historically wrong to say nothing happened. Of course, things happened in every country. This whole course could be on the history of Portugal and wouldn't be able enough to cover everything. However, we're focusing on, the major things that transform history in Europe, and not too much was being transformed in Eastern Europe during this time because it remained pretty much in the Middle Ages. So let's talk about Austria. Austria was dominated by the House of Habsburg, the same way Spain was, from the 1200s all the way to World War I. It was one of the strongest members of the Holy Roman Empire until Napoleon got rid of the Holy Roman Empire in 1806. Austria then becomes the Austrian Empire. Prince Metternich is from Austria. He leads the Congress of Vienna in 1815, and this part should have been before that, but Austria becomes the Austrian Empire, which had many different ethnic groups of people living inside of it, which will lead to nationalist and liberal movements later on. So Austria is an empire. It has Croatians living in it. It has Serbians living in it. It has Hungarians living on it. All these people that see themselves as ethnically different and therefore are going to want their own countries, that nationalistic idea, as we get into the 1800s, as we're talking about the isms right now. So this is clearly not all of the list of Austrian monarchs, but it's the most important one. Charles V, the Holy Roman Empire, remember him. Ferdinand II started the 30 Years' War when he became Holy Roman Emperor. Charles III is Maria Theresa's father, who went around trying to get all the countries to sign the Pragmatic Sanction that said that Maria, basically a woman, could, inherit the Habsburg Empire. All the countries agreed to it, but then when he died, Prussia, under Frederick the Great, Frederick II, who we're going to talk about in a minute, immediately invaded and took Silesia away from Austria. However, Maria Theresa was able to keep her throne. She ruled with her son Joseph II together until her death, and then he ruled for about 10 years after that as well. He was an enlightened despot or monarch who basically tried to do all of these enlightened things for the people: ease censorship, religious freedom, open up schools, get rid of serfdom. However, Joseph II makes these changes a bit too fast, and by the time he dies, a lot of his actions were overturned. Russia. So Russia is going to become a lot more important as we get into the second half of this class. Peter the Great is the most important ruler we've talked about so far. He modernized and westernized Russia based on Western countries like France, copied the Palace of Versailles by building St. Petersburg, defeated Sweden in the Great Northern War to gain warm water ports so they could start taking, trading and making money that way as well. Also instituted that beard tax because he thought when he went to France, basically they were making fun of the way Russians dressed and their beards. He didn't want to be seen as a joke anymore, so he wanted people to transform themselves. Catherine II, who we better know as Catherine the Great, is going to come, half a century after him. She's going to be kind of an enlightened leader. She's going to patronize Enlightenment writers, open a school for girls, and bring some stability to Russia. However, is also going to keep serfdom and use some censorship. So again, how enlightened any of these enlightened monarchs are is a really good debate question. And then Alexander II, he's going to be the one that finally emancipates the serfs in 1861, realizing he needed to industrialize and modernize his country if he ever wants to keep up with the strong countries that are going on during the Industrial Revolution in the West, especially in England, Germany, France. So Prussia. That was bad. Kingdom of Prussia, 1701 to 1918. However, Prussia becomes part of Germany in 1871. The most important leader you need to know there, also another enlightened leader, was Frederick II or Frederick the Great, who turned Prussia into a great military state and was an absolute ruler. Again, religious freedom, patronized art writers, he tried to ease censorship on his people, that sort of thing. This is going to be the start of Prussia, and he's ruler in the 1700s. Remember, he's the one that begins the War of Austrian Succession when he attacks Austria to take over Silesia, breaking the Pragmatic Sanction that he signed. We are going to talk about Germany a ton, starting with their unification later in the 1800s. They're a major player in World War I. They're a major player in between World War I and World War II, and obviously a main player in World War II and even after. So Germany is going to start to Prussia, which becomes Germany, is going to become ever more important. But there's not so much that you need to know so far. So as I end these videos, again, the last thing I want to say, this is not everything that you need to know. It'd be impossible to put so much into these short videos. However, it should be hopefully put together the context of these countries and give you an overall idea. You still need to know Enlightenment writers and books they wrote. You still need to know artists, writers along with their book, scientists and what they discovered, people's contributions. But hopefully this is helpful to give you a general, and in some areas more specific, history of these countries from what we've learned to them so far. Take care.